11th hour bid simulation is put together by the American Society of Professional Estimators, the ASPE. That's some information up on the screen in case you like to learn more or get in touch with ASPE. There's a national ASPE organization, and then there are several chapters throughout the United States. The folks that are involved in today's bid simulation are members of the Kansas City Heartland Chapter number 32, and we've got a website that you can go and check out. Certainly after the session is over, you're welcome to go up and talk to any of us if you have further questions. Also wanted to clarify too that the sign outside of the program for today indicate like a session 1 and a session 2. We wanted to make sure you guys understood that session 2 is really just a continuation of session 1. So session 1 is going to consist of us kind of talking about some introductory stuff and maybe going through some best practices in a hard bid scenario and bid comparison. And then session 2 will be where we actually roll into the bid simulation. Okay, so you're like to introduce the ASPE presenters that are with us today. So we've got, you guys can stand up, raise your hand, or Phil Turner, with George J. Shaw, Construction in Town, Greg Weinberg with National Commercial Builders, Paul Hansen, over here on the right, with McCarthy Building Company, Katie Clemens, and Amber, I'm going to put your last name, Strump, okay, pretty close. With the County Board of Construction here in Kansas City, and Lonnie Mills with Jabil Contracts. Okay, so these folks all belong to the Kansas City chapter, and they're going to be our bid day helpers today. They're also going to be playing the parts of various subcontractors and suppliers, and so you guys will have the ability later to ask questions, and these will be the folks that you're going to go and talk to when you do that. So today's session is going to include, after I PowerPoint you to death, and hopefully with a belly full of barbecue, you won't be able to fall asleep on us out there. We're going to be experiencing a simulated, competitive, or what we call a hard bid proposal submission to an owner. You guys are going to be working against the clock, and you're going to be competing against the other bid simulation teams here in the room. So we're going to break you guys up into, we've got 17 six-person teams. You guys are going to get to work with your team under a time frame. So first off, if you haven't been around this or you aren't familiar with it, what is a hard bid? So keep in mind the current state of our industry. There's a lot of construction management firms or general contractors that derive their work or all their work or a significant portion of work through negotiated relationships. Nevertheless, there's some owners out there that still desire or may be required by statutory limitations on the procurement practices to put out their project through a competitive bidding process. Okay, so we call that competitive bid process a hard bid scenario. And a hard bid scenario typically involves submission of a single lump sum price for the entirety of the project. So today your job will be to calculate a single number that is for the entirety of the project. That pricing you calculate has to include all direct and indirect costs, so certainly labor, material, equipment, subcontract costs, but also things like bonds and insurance premiums and the markup that we put on for profit and overhead. Costs are estimated based on a completed set of design documents. That's another thing that kind of differentiates a hard bid from some of the other project delivery methods that owners may be using out there. Is in a competitive bid situation, we're being provided with a finished set, or what the architects are telling us is a finished set of design documents. And then also common in a hard bid scenario, and certainly there are other ways to turn in the bid, but a lot of projects involve actually filling out a paper bid form, sealing it in an envelope, and turning it in. When you're working on a competitive bid, these hard bids usually have a specified due date and time. Estimators are working furiously to complete their proposals by that deadline, which we refer to as our bid day. After the bids are turned in, it's commonly followed by another meeting where they open the bids and read them out loud. Sometimes people kind of jokingly refer to that as a rip and read, and maybe some of you have had the opportunity to attend those or be a bid runner, taking a bid and turning those in. And just so I kind of know who we've got here in the room today, I'm a few slides further in than I meant to ask this question, but how many folks do I have here that are actual estimators that work in the estimating departments of your company? Okay, so several of you. How many folks do I have here today that are just like owner's reps? Okay, they're interested in seeing the process from the owner's perspective. How about designers? Do we have some designers? Here's want to make bad designer jokes. I don't want to offend anybody. It looks like I'm safe to make those jokes today, so I'll try to keep them fairly reasonable. So anyway, proposals are read out loud, so the participants are able to learn in a hard bid process if it's a public bid opening, if they were successful right on the spot. So if you attend one of those, you walk out of the room, you know whether you got the job or didn't get the job based on if your bid was low. So in this procurement approach, low price is the most important consideration for the owner. And as we like to say, the lowest responsible and responsive bid is typically awarded the contract. So what we mean by that is it's a combination of low price, responsible means that, can they furnish the bonds on the project, and responsive bids, did they cross their T's and dot their I's when they fill out the bid form? Did they forget to indicate addenda, or did they forget to do something else, or forget to enclose a schedule or some other supporting document? So it's possible to get your bid dismissed on a technicality, and we want to always be mindful of that in a competitive or hard bid situation, that we are complying with all of the requirements of turning our bid in. Okay, so hard bid challenges. So when you're in a situation where you're going through a project like this, again, imagine in your mind that you've been working on something for a couple of weeks, and it's all going to be boiling down to, the last hour, the 11th hour, kind of what we're going to end up simulating here today. Getting ready for that bid day, construction management firm or general contractor, you're going to be looking at perhaps dozens of trades. You might have anywhere from 20 to 50 different work packages or trades involved in a project. Each of those could have anywhere from 5 to 10 to maybe 15 bids, depending on the market saturation and what kind of bid coverage you're getting. So you do the math there. That's a lot of proposals to try to sort through, sometimes in a relatively short amount of time. Okay, lots of opportunities to miss something, lots of opportunities to make mistakes. So we're looking at these proposals, and we're going to show you guys kind of an ASPE best practice for helping to process through those proposals and make sure we don't make those mistakes. We're going to be looking at stuff like pricing and quantities. So if we've had an opportunity to take off for that scope of work, and we can compare our quantity to the subcontractors' quantity or the supplier's quantity, that's helpful to recognize errors right there on the spot if something's not jiving up there. Certainly scope is the big one that we're going to talk about a lot here. We're going to look at scope when we're reviewing the scope of bid. We're looking at, what spec sections did they bid, what have they included in their work, maybe what have they excluded in their work, and then how complete is their bid. There were 5 spec sections that we expect in that work package, and they only picked up 4. Then we got a hole that we need to plug there, fill that out. Certainly we're looking for risk. Again, risk means missing prices. Risk means subcontractors, suppliers we're not familiar with. And risk could involve a number of other factors, just such as low numbers compared to other bidders. We're looking for errors in there. Maybe our quantities don't match. And then the last one, believe it or not, this might even be the first thing that you want to check. Is it the correct project? Okay, sometimes your firm may be bidding multiple projects in the same day. Maybe that client has several jobs bidding the same day at different locations around the country. So when we pick up a quote, before we start the scoping process, the first thing you want to check, hint, is to look and make sure that it's for the correct job that you're bidding. Okay? All right. So in a hard bid scenario, as I mentioned before, estimators are tasked with preparing a single, all-inclusive lump sum price. So that means they got one shot at getting it right. And certainly those of you that are familiar with bidding understand that. Whether you're a prime contractor or especially a trade contractor, you turn in a number like that that's really trying to do your job. You got one shot getting it right. That means estimators certainly have to possess experience and competence so that they can kind of grasp the entirety of the project. They've really got to gain an understanding in a fairly short amount of time of the building systems and all the logistics necessary to perform the work. Everything from how we're going to lay the job out to we're going to have to put down temporary parking or bus our employees from another site across the way, how we're going to manage our trash, how we're going to recycle stuff if we're doing that, or we're going to conduct meetings, or we're going to have lay down areas. There's all these things that we need to look at. And again, we've kind of got one shot at doing it, and we've got to make sure that we're doing it so that we can win the award of that project and construct it and make a profit. Okay, so along with that, estimators also have the ability to identify and quantify elements of risk. So again, as we're looking at the project, not just now, I'm talking about before we get to the bids, right? But even just in starting to build the estimate and looking at the project and experiences where it's going to be a major driver of this, but you've got to be able to look at a project and really understand what the riskiest parts of it are, where you need to spend your time and putting the thing together, and these risks end up equating to costs. And the project can equate to cost, and what we don't want is we don't want them to become unplanned costs that are coming out of our profit budget. So once we kind of have a sense of what these risks are, we can develop strategies and put appropriate cost measures in our estimate, so in the form of probably like contingencies or allowances, so that we can deal with these risks if and when they do happen. Other challenges, so while some of the bids are going to come in maybe well in advance of bid day, a couple days or before the days leading up to it, many of the bids end up coming in the day of the bid. And certainly it's possible to see the mechanical, electrical bids come in the final hour or hours before the bid. So you can wrap your mind around this. The mechanical, electrical scopes of work are sometimes the largest contracts on the job, or can be the largest contracts on the job. They're certainly some of the most complex scopes on the job, and so the idea that those are going to be some of the last bids that roll in for your company can create a lot of drama and stress as you're trying to process through that. There's techniques that you can employ to try to minimize that stress, such as requesting the scope sheets from your subcontractors the day before or the days leading up, so you've got plenty of time to go back and forth on the phone and clarify scope and work out those details, so that in that 11th hour, when all you're waiting on at that point is the number, and you know what scope those subs are going to include. So there are some kind of best management practices there if you have enough estimating staff to follow that. So anyway, it creates a time crunch for us to get through those proposals if it's coming down the wire. And it's pretty common in most companies. If they have the staff to do it, they might put together, kind of jokingly call it the war room, but you're gathering a bunch of people together in a room or adjacent rooms, and you're dividing up the different work packages and scopes of work so that people can sort through those bids and kind of quickly become an expert in that particular scope of work for that particular project. So when you're pulling those people together, you may be bringing in people that haven't seen the job yet. You may be calling in superintendents that are between jobs. You may be bringing in project managers who would probably rather be doing what they normally do, but you're going to wrangle them in for the day to help that student. So you could have a lot of people that haven't seen the job, haven't been working on it for a couple weeks, and you're going to need a way to kind of quickly get those folks up to speed on the job so they can be helpful to you in the process. So we call this kind of hectic and stressful time the 11th hour, and it's pretty imperative that you keep your cool, stay cool under fire when you're doing that. And so simulating these final hours in a practice scenario like we're going to do here today in the rollover session allows participants to kind of survive the process, learn from your mistakes in an environment where there are no real financial consequences. So we don't want to screw up a real bid day, so it's kind of fun to be able to practice it and not be worried about the outcome. All right. So again, why do a hard bid simulation? So by show of hands here, I asked if we had any designers or owners in the room. We had a couple owners that raised their hands. I'm glad you're here. So owners and designers have probably been involved in a bid day from an outside perspective, but they may have not had any insight into what it looks like from a construction management firm or general contractor's perspective. So this is an opportunity for them to sit in on the process and maybe try to understand the challenges that are involved in asking your clients, asking contractors to prepare lump sum bids or competitive bids. Similar, you might have some subs who have never seen what it really looks like from the GC's end. Okay, I'm a roofing sub. I'm going to get my bid done. I'm going to send it off, and I'm going to go out to lunch. Okay, and they don't recognize that from the contractor's perspective or GC's perspective, we might have 15 roofing bids we're trying to quickly process through, and we want to call that sub back, and they're out getting a pizza or something. So giving them the opportunity to see it from our perspective, I think, can be helpful to both sides. And then the other reason to do a bid simulation, and despite the increasing popularity of other project delivery methods, I think the truth is that hard bidding or competitive bidding is never going to go away entirely. There are some owners, again, that because of statutory limitations that affect their procurement department, they may be stuck doing competitive bidding for some time in the future. There have been a lot of public agencies that have formed up to other project delivery methods, and I think through educating owners, they begin to understand that some of those other methods certainly do have advantages over competitive bidding, but I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. All right, so what you guys will be doing today, your team today will be playing the part of a prime contractor, a general contractor, or a construction management firm. And you guys will be working with your team to finalize a lump sum proposal. So again, your job is to try to get down to one number for the entirety of the job. Okay, you're going to be given numerous proposals from fictitious subcontractors and suppliers, and it's going to be up to you to review those bids for both price and scope. And the big one, of course, is scope, to try to understand if it's a complete proposal, and if it's not, what are we going to need to do to it to make it complete. And I will just tell you, many of the quotes are going to be missing stuff, okay? And that's kind of by design to give you guys the challenge of trying to put that stuff together. You will be allowed to ask questions. So as I mentioned, our ASPE helpers up here will be playing the part of probably numerous subcontractors. Lonnie, how many different subs are you going to be today?
Just one today.
Just one today? How many are you going to be, Paul?
Just one.
Just one. Okay, well, so they got it easy, right? So I've seen them times past seem like they were playing part of 3 or 4 subs. So you'll be able to walk up with your quote, ask questions, get clarifications, maybe get some cost added in or something of that nature. if you need to. All right, so what's already been done here? So again, since this represents the final hour or hours of a competitive bid process, I'm going to kind of give you just a tiny bit of backstory here. So imagine that your company's been working on this project for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, week and a half, however much time you've had to put together, again, based on the client and the size of the project and how busy your estimating department might be. But imagine that all the things that are bullet pointed on the screen have already been done. So we would have sent out invitations to bid. Most construction firms keep some type of database of bidders organized by work trade classification and geographic area. And so they would have sent out invitations to bid to try to get companies interested in bidding the project. And then certainly a big part of estimating is following up on those invitations. You invite 15 electrical contractors and you start calling them and nobody's going to bid your job. That's the kind of surprise you don't want to have happen to you on bid day. We want to know we're going to have good bid coverage, and that means somebody has got to take the time to follow up with all the subs that we invited and find out who is and who is not bidding, see if we can talk some of them into bidding. If none of them are bidding, we've got to go back to our database and find some other subs to invite, and hopefully still have time to get them interested. Next bullet point says, provide access for the interested bidders to the bid documents. So again, you can email them out, great. If we have an FTP site or some cloud-based platform where the subs and suppliers can go and download the bid documents, we want to be as helpful as we can in making sure we get the information to the companies that we've invited to bid. If the project is going to require bonds, surety bonds, we probably already reached out to our surety and requested an instrument called a bid bond. Have you guys heard that term before? Bid bond, bid security. Okay, so a bid bond or bid security is like a mini, I'm going to use the word insurance even though that's technically not right. It's like a mini insurance policy to ensure that contractors are going to honor their bid and enter into a binding agreement. So if for some reason we bid a job competitively and we bomb the bid, we're low, we're way too low, we want to get out of the bid, okay, our surety is going to have to pay out the specified percentage of the bid amount. Bid bonds are typically in the 5 to 10% range. Okay, so if we bid if we turn in a bid of $1 million and all the other bids are at $1,750,000, and we recognize that we're $750,000 low, if we had a 5% bid bond, we'd have to forfeit $50,000 in cash to get out of doing that job. So it's not a good scenario to be in. It kind of wrecks your relationship with your surety. They're going to make you pay it back. So for all reasons why we don't ever want that to happen. But that's the purpose of a bid bond or bid guarantee. It kind of protects the owner and ensures the contractor is going to honor the bid and enter into a binding agreement. Okay, we would have already performed takeoff for new self-performed scope. So when you hear people talk about managing a project, we have work that is done by people on our own payroll. That's referred to as self-performer. We have work that we subcontract out to specialty contractors or trade contractors. And so imagine if we were going to perform finished carpentry on this job, or if we were going to do drywall work on this job, we would have already done our takeoff and put together pricing for that work. And in fact, I think today you guys are going to get an internal price for the building concrete work package, meaning we've got crews that can do that work, and we've calculated and distilled it down to one number. It's our internal price to do the building concrete, and we'll be able to compare that to any subcontractor bids that come in for that same scope of work. Certainly, if we have time, we would have also worked up what we call placeholder or plug numbers for the subcontracting scope of work. So that's a factor of how much extra time you have. You get all this other stuff done, and you've got your self-performed work taken care of, and then if you still got time, you're going to try to go through the different sub-trades and perform a high-level conceptual takeoff or whatever level of takeoff you have time for, and you're going to do that for the purposes of creating a budget for that scope of work. So let's say, for instance, the roofing example I've used a couple times already. We go and look at it, it's TPO roofing. We're going to do a takeoff in square feet, convert that to squares, pull out some historical cost data, and create a plug number that we can put in our estimates. We have a big fat zero set there. We've got a number in there, a budget number in our estimate that we're hopefully going to be able to replace with a market bid on bid day. And then the last bullet point here is kind of one of the best practices, things that we're going to spend time looking at in the next PowerPoint that we're going to roll into, is we've previously developed what we call bid comparison worksheets, or quote comparison worksheets, or kind of the slang term for them is bid tab sheets. We've made one for each scope of work. And so basically a bid tab sheet is a simple spreadsheet that's formatted in a manner to make it easier for us to compare subcontractor proposals and supplier proposals to check pricing and scope. We're going to kind of walk you through how to use that form, and that's going to be a big part of what we're doing today, is using those bid tab sheets that, again, your company would have previously prepared. Most companies, most estimating departments have already got those prepared, probably like a master template that they pull up and edit for the job, the specifics of the job. Delete stuff they don't need, add scope that's not there. Okay? All right, so after you finalize your estimate, what are we going to be doing? You're going to be filling out your bid proposal form with the bid form. On the bid form, if you've had an end on the job, you want to be sure to indicate that. You're going to obviously indicate your base bid, your lump sum, your one all-inclusive price. If the owners ask for any alternate prices, we're going to also indicate those. You're going to seal your proposal in an envelope, and then your goal, of course, is to turn it in on time or early if you can, and then always keep in mind that the owner's clock governs. So if you've ever been to an actual bid delivery, there's usually a place to turn that in. Sometimes they have a time stamp machine that they slip your envelope into and punch that out, and there's usually some kind of clock on the wall there or whatever. It's the official bid clock, and so you want to check that against your smartphone or your watch, make sure that there isn't a difference there, and if there is, then you need to capture that and get the owner's clock. Okay, so goals of the program. So certainly our goal is to help other with the ASPEs. Our goals are to educate estimators on the workflow challenges, maybe some of the best practices involved in going through a hard bid proposal process. We want to, as I mentioned earlier, also provide the opportunity for any subs or suppliers or trade contractors to kind of experience it from their client's perspective. So that may be helpful to them to understand what the GC or the CMs are going through on their end. And then lastly, we've got maybe we have some couple students. Do we have any students here today? Okay, where are you from?
Springfield, Missouri State.
I saw some Pittsburgh State guys in one of the sessions earlier. I don't know if they're still with us or not. So certainly give it students, architects if they're here, owners, representatives if they're here, and any other industry players who are interested in learning about this, an opportunity to be involved and see what it's all about. Okay, the last couple things, just trying to provide a safe environment to learn from mistakes. Again, there's no real financial consequences here. Have a little friendly competition between teams. Create a mildly stressful but still fun experience, and then of course you get bragging rights if your team ends up being a little better. So stuff we're going to be handing out to you guys today. Okay, so we're going to give you, after I'm done with this PowerPoint, before we roll into the second one, we're going to probably move you guys into teams and distribute some documentation to you, and then you guys will get a little bit of opportunity to kind of look through that stuff. But I think we're going to give you the instructions to bidders. Okay, so if you're bidding a job, those are kind of the rules of the road, right? We need to find those instructions to bidders and read them. And make sure that we're going to be able to cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's. And the instructions bidders are going to make talk about things like, is there a pre-bid meeting? And where is it? When is it? Is the job going to be taxable? Is the job going to require surety bonds? Okay? Are there mandated wage rates? So there's any number of things that might show up in those instructions to bidders, but we want to familiarize ourselves with those as quickly as possible. We're also going to give you guys bid documents. We're going to give you guys a small set of plans for the project that we'll be doing today. And of course, you don't have the luxury of having worked on it for 2 weeks, so you're going to get about 5 minutes to look at it with your team. It's a fairly simple job, so don't panic. And whether you have super deep, intimate knowledge of the project or not is not going to be a major factor for you today in finishing completion of your estimate. Okay, we're going to give you the bid proposal form. So that's the actual bid form, paper bid form. You're going to fill out later with one price and an envelope to seal it into. We're going to give you an anticipated list of trade bids, subcontractor and supplier bids. So Addendum sent out all those invitations to bid, and we're waiting for those bids to come back. So we would have had a list of, imagine we've already made all the phone calls, we know who's bid and who's not. Okay, so we know we've got a reasonable amount of bid coverage out there. And then we're going to give you the bid comparison sheets. Okay, the bid tab sheets, you're going to get one for each scope. You'll have one for concrete, you'll have one for masonry, you'll have one for roofing, you'll have one for whatever else. Okay, we try to have one of those bid tab sheets for each of the different work packages or trades, kind of know way to think of it. And then, of course, we're going to give you a series or several waves of simulated bids from subcontractors. We're not going to dump the whole batch on you at once. We're going to give you some, and then we're going to give you some more, and then we're going to give you some more after that. Kind of like they come in on bid day. You get wave after wave of them coming in throughout the day. And then the last thing we're going to provide you with is an estimate summary sheet, an estimate summary spreadsheet. And the summary sheet is really where we pull all the costs together. So we're going to take, for instance, if we're looking at our bid tab sheet for roofing, we will have recorded our roofing bids. We'll have scoped those bids. We'll have looked at the pricing, and we will have determined who is the best roofing subcontractor proposal to use, and we will eventually move the total for that sub onto the summary sheet, and we'll do the same thing for all the other trades and the summary sheets where we get to add it up and come to a subtotal and run it through the add-ons and markups like insurance and bonds and profit and overhead, all the things we're going to tack on kind of the back page of the estimate, so to speak. But we're going to give you that summary sheet in Excel. It's a very simple Excel worksheet here. We're going to give each team a laptop. We kind of got them teed up over here. So when you guys get put on a team, you're maybe going to want to think about who's a good Excel driver. And I would like to say that the greatest asset of Excel is its infinite flexibility, and the greatest liability of Excel is its infinite flexibility, right? So it's easy to screw stuff up. So you want to make sure you got somebody on there kind of halfway knows what they're doing with Excel. All right, other considerations to think about, self-performed work. So again, I mentioned today that you guys are going to give you a sheet that shows what your company's internal price is for the building concrete package. So we're talking about concrete packages on the job. It kind of falls into two big broad categories. We have building concrete, or some people call it building structural concrete. That's going to be the footings, the foundation, the slabs, the slab on grade, the slab on deck, shear walls, anything, concrete columns, anything that's inside within the envelope of the building that's part of the cast in place concrete. The other broad concrete package, of course, we refer to as site concrete. So we're talking about curb and gutter and sidewalks and dumpster slabs and parking lots and anything that might be transformer pads, anything that's kind of outside the building. So it's possible the same subs can bid site concrete, building concrete, but it's also possible to have different subs doing that as well. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out today. You might also get sub bids for that internal scope of work. So again, you're going to have an internal price for building concrete. Don't be surprised if at least one or a couple with also provide you with a market bid for that as well. We're going to give you, for some of the other trades, you'll see them, they'll already be populated on the summary sheet. We're going to give you plug numbers for certain scopes of work, and then if you don't get any bids at the end of the day, you're going to be stuck using that plug number. If you do get bids, you want to evaluate, and you want to replace them on there. Okay, so plugs are basically an educated guess for the value of that work package, and that educated guess is going to be based on the quantity takeoff that we were able to perform and the historical cost data that we were able to apply to those quantities to come up with the best number that we can generate with the information and time that we have available to us. All right, a couple more considerations to kick around. Addenda, again, remember, addenda are changes made to bid documents, and the technical definition of it, I think, is prior to entering into an agreement. We think about addenda during the bidding process as changes made to bid documents while we're bidding the job. So sometimes when you get a set of plans, they've already issued an addenda. Sometimes people start working on the project and submit questions, and that generates addenda. So they can come out for a variety of reasons and a variety of different times, but we want to be mindful of those. And if addenda have been issued, we want to acknowledge that on the bid form. We also want to make sure that all of the subcontractors and suppliers that are turning in bids to us have seen the addenda. My motto is all addenda, all subs, all the time. Okay, so even if on the fourth addenda there was one item and it's electrical, and I'm talking to a masonry sub and they haven't seen that, I don't care. I want that masonry sub to go back and look at that addenda and then tell me that yes, it does not affect them, or no, it does not affect them, or yes, it does. Okay, so I think that's a good strategy if you can adopt that to make all subs acknowledge all the addenda. Okay, let them decide for themselves. Alternate bids, again, if an owner asks for them, we're obligated to price them. An alternate bid is some change made to the core bid documents that we're pricing for the owner's consideration. Alternates can be an add or a deduct. Alternates can be simple, or they can be complex. So if we're doing something as simple as changing a light fixture, maybe the owner says, well, if we substitute this light fixture for this light fixture, does that save me money or cost me money? Or you can have a complex alternate where maybe you're quoting a four-story hotel and they want to know how much it would be to add a fifth floor to the hotel. Okay, so alternates can be simple or complex, add or deduct. You need to always know what time and place the bids are due. So where are we turning in bids today, Phil? All right, this front table where all the subs are. So we're going to bring that up to this front table here, and we'll talk about the time that's going to be due. And then as you guys are working on your proposals, it's going to be imperative that you watch the time, keep an eye on the clock. Time can get away from you fairly easy. And then I would maybe try to make it a goal to have a number figured out, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes before bid time closes. That gives you some time to review, some time to make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's as we've talked about. So today's project that we're going to be working on, when it was put out for bid or originally developed, is called the McBride Brothers Building. It's located in Louisville, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver. About almost 22,000 square foot building. I think if you go on Google Maps, it's actually called something else now, so I don't think the McBride Brothers still own it. Maybe they do own it and they've leased it out. But anyway, that's kind of a curbside view from Google Street View of what the project looks like. So it did get built. It's out there. All right, and then we'll come to the end here. The bid day simulation that we're going to use today, all of the fake bids and all of the bid tab worksheets, and the next PowerPoint we're going to run through real fast, was put together by the ASPE Denver chapter. So we always like to extend our thank you to those folks for putting that together. And I do believe that you can buy this program from them if you want to run your own bid day simulation and use the materials. Does that sound right, Phil? All right. Choosing our teams for today. So we need a show of hands. People in the room, who has hard bid experience? Who's been through a competitive bid before? Raise them up really, really high. Okay, so the good news is we've got more than 7 people here. So ideally, we would like to get at least one of you experienced people on each of our teams. Since you've got kind of one person in your group that's done this before, you're going to kind of end up being the unofficial team captain, whether you want to be or not. I'm sorry, we're going to draft you in here. Okay, and then everyone else is going to draw numbers so we can kind of group you up on teams. And then after we get the numbers drawn, we'll take a few minutes to let you guys get the team. So are we ready to draw numbers? Okay, so again, team captains, kind of raise your hand, stand up or something that'll make it easier to see. Okay? All right, you're a captain, stand up, 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 you're a captain, stand up. Another shy captain over here, doesn't want to stand up. We won't draft if we're going to need. We need, what do we want? Phil, 7? 17. We need 7 captains. Okay, looks like I'm counting 5. Paul doesn't count. Does that help? Anybody else? Any other people? You gonna do it? All right, we got a brave soul there. All right, we're up to 6. And one more, 7. All right, 7. Okay, so we got our team captains. All right, so Paul's gonna come around. He's gonna let you guys draw numbers, and then I don't know how this number thing works. He probably knows how it works. But then we're gonna have you guys shift around and get with your captains. We're gonna hand out some documentation. Then we'll run through that other. I love that other PowerPoint presentation.
I don't know what my number is.
After you get with your team, take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, get to know each other on a first name basis, maybe kind of decide who might be more.
It's good you're team captain so you can see what happens when the electrical bid comes in 10 minutes before it's due.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen it. Yeah, maybe.
I think it was funny they brought that out because mechanical electrical and plumbing are probably the 3 biggest bids that some contractors shop that like down there, like Larry Schneider, Carlson, that they shop on. So.
Oh, I've turned them in the minutes before.
I'm all about it.
We have a.
You get 15 minutes to look at mine.
And you folded it?
I don't get shopped.
You folded it too?
You're on me?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. You got the short straw today. So,
Yep.
your student, how much practical bid experience do you have?
So at the wheel, I'm an estimating entry, so I've been to
Class number? A little bit this.
it's just, some of the skills.
Yeah, I've done a lot of like bids, but not from the different contractors.
Yeah, in case you didn't hear me a minute ago, you can start getting with your teammates, maybe figure out people have different experience with different scopes of work, like somebody's really knowledgeable about masonry,
Who's 7?
or concrete, or roofing, or mechanical, electrical work. You probably assign that person to work on that. Figure out who's going to be turning your bid in, figure out who's going to fill out the bid form and seal it in the envelope, figure out who's going to drive your spreadsheet.
Come on, 7.
And then be thinking of a team name. You guys can't just be team 1 or team 2, team 3. You got to come up with some cool names. How are we doing out there? Where's team 1? Where's team 1? Where's team 1? Okay, you guys good? You guys good to go? Didn't figure it out? Okay, good. All right. We're start handing some stuff out here. Team 2, where's team 2? You guys okay? Ready to get going? You're okay? Team 3. Where's team 3? Team 3. Where's team 3? Team 3, are you out there?
So you give me a hint.
Team 4.
Just share with Aiden, text me, and then I'll write it down on the board.
Team 6.
Made it sound like you're trying to take it.
You on this team?
Team 6, go get it.
Yeah, I was on one.
Team 7.
People.
Team 7. Okay, so the second PowerPoint is again kind of talking about some of the best practices that we're going to just quick background ways to procure work. Direct award from owners like the dream scenario. Client calls you up, says we love you, we've worked with you before, we got another project, we just want you guys to do it. Okay, so if that falls in your lap, that's awesome. Doesn't happen to us all the time. Other things we might do is kind of the whole 2-step negotiated process of the RFQ and followed by an RFP. So we may be turning this to bill of qualifications, followed by our fee and general conditions proposal. That might lead to a second round where we get to go in and interview with the client. Again, kind of a best value selections process. That might be in the RFP, competitive proposal, where we turn in a detailed estimate, maybe with schedule and some other partial design or something like that. And then finally, down to what we're doing today here, a hard bid scenario is a way to win work. When we're thinking about the hard bid project delivery approach, and you'll also hear people refer to this as the traditional delivery method, or sometimes people call it design, bid, build, if you've heard that term before, where those phases of the project are happening sequentially. Design finishes, then it goes to a bidding phase, and it goes to a construction phase. So hard bidding is kind of tied into that design, bid, build, project delivery method. So some pros and cons of that. One advantage of hard bids is it's a common procurement method used by a lot of clients, so they have a high level of familiarity and comfort with it. Also, so a con of that would be it's obviously not the only way to get work, and there's a lot of companies out there that don't hard bid any work, or hard bid very little work, or hard bid work only when they have to. In hard bidding, another pro is that we're typically dealing with 100% design information. Okay, so contrast that against negotiated work where we may be handed a 30% set, or we're involved in schematic design where there really isn't much more than a napkin sketch or a very baseline model that's been established, and we're asked to put together an estimate off that. It's a little tougher. Okay, so the con of hard bidding is that there's no minimal chances or no chances to for scope clarifications, and as we're being handed a finished set of plans, and we're stuck bidding what's been designed, and we haven't been able to provide any collaboration or input on that. One pro to hard bid is that you often get quick notice if it's a public bid opening of how you did that day. When you walk out there, a lot of times you know if you were the low bidder or not. Some hard bid projects for private clients, they don't do public bid openings, and all they ever tell you is you got it or you didn't get it. That sucks when that happens because you never know how your number was. Okay. Another con of the hard bidding environment is basically anyone that can meet the statutory requirements, if they can meet the bonding requirements, the licensing requirements, and the insurance requirements, then they can bid the job. That can lead to a lot of competitors on publicly funded jobs, which is lower profit margins for the companies that bid it and ultimately get it. Another pro for hard bid is that we end up entering a lump sum contract, so we know the value of the project on the front end, and then a con there is that we have a little opportunity to fix our mistakes. And we have one chance, one shot at getting our number right and turning it in, and then we're going to be stuck signing a contract and building a project for that amount of money, and hopefully we got it right. Okay. All right, so now we come down to kind of the core piece of what's going on today, which is proposal analysis, looking at quotes from suppliers and subcontractors for the various work packages on a project, and try to make sense of which proposal is the right one to use to roll over to the summary sheet where we pull all the costs together. Okay, so it says face values of proposals are usually not comparable. So what we mean by that is when you pick up any two proposals and you validate that they're both for the correct job, okay, the next thing you look at is price. Okay, so sub A is high, sub B is low. Okay, so that's taking it at face value. But as we start to drill down into the specifics of the proposal, we may begin to recognize why one sub is higher and one sub is lower. And it's because someone's missing something, or someone's doubled up on something, or some other factor that's created. So we have to be careful just looking at the face value of the quote. We can't just look at the price and know what we need to know. We've got to drill down deeper. Okay, so we're looking for exclusion of unusual or difficult items of work. We're looking for missed scope items that they just didn't see it, so we're asking the subs questions when we can. Did you get this? Do you have this? Did you pick this up? And so maybe they didn't see it, maybe they don't have it, and the other proposals that you're looking at do have that, so now you've got a situation where you're not apples to apples, you're apples to oranges, okay, or apples to bananas. Have they included different work items that maybe we didn't want to include? Okay, maybe they're doubled up on some. Maybe the drywall subs have got setting all the hollow metal frames and metal stud walls, and we're going to do that with our self-perform crew. Okay, so we're doubled up on that now. So somebody's got to back it out. We're going to be double up on it. Okay, so we eventually have to adjust to the subcontractor's base proposal so that we can reach a comparable total to the other subcontractor proposal. We're basically trying to get to that apples to apples comparison by making sure they have the same scope in there. Okay, and of course we're going to do that by adding budget for missing items. We've mentioned a couple times already this idea of a placeholder number, a plug number, an educated guess. We know what, kind of on a high level, we think we know what the value of that work is, and if someone's missing it, we're going to take our budget number and we're going to fill that hole in their bid by moving our number over on the bid tab sheet. We're going to show you what that looks like here in just a little bit. Okay, or sometimes we've got to deduct for too much of it. Either somebody's doubled up on something or picking up something we don't want them to pick up because none of their competitors are doing it. We might call them and ask them to back it out if they didn't give us the detailed quote. We can take it out ourselves. Okay, so how do we do this? How does this process work? How do we get, to the point where we can select the winning proposal? The good news is we have this decision-making flow chart that we're going to allow you guys to use. And I'm just kidding. Okay, how are we going to tackle this stuff in reality? We're going to use a form that we referred to a couple times already as a bid comparison sheet or bid tab sheet. Okay, so up on screen is an example of a bid tab sheet. So it's for Division 4 masonry. You can see we've got some columns set up out here for up to, it looks like up to 6 bidders on this. So imagine that you'd be recording the information for each individual bidder A, bidder B, bidder C, bidder D. And this sheet is really the core of the scoping and bid comparison process is using this sheet. So let's so this shows the sheet in its entirety. These guys already got copies of that. They have copies of the test sheets. Okay, so you can kind of look on screen, you can maybe grab a copy of one of them that you've got out there in the packet of stuff that we've given you. Okay, so you can see a little bit closer detail here. You can put in the name of the project, and we're going to start listing the bidders. So this is an example of a masonry one. So first bidder was Lego Builders, second bidder was Lincoln and Stickham, third one was Block and Masonry. So again, imagine we've got proposals from those subcontractors, we're recording the name of the company, we're recording whether or not they're bidders for plan and spec. So if the proposal hasn't said that or doesn't reference that, we may want to call them back and verify that that is. Have they seen the addenda? Do they have a bond rate? And ultimately, we may not bond ourselves, but in the same manner that owners ask us to provide surety bonds as kind of a safety net for them on the project, we can also ask subcontractors to provide surety bonds to us. They normally don't include that bond cost in their proposals because they want the prices to look competitive, but if they are bondable, they'll furnish the bond rate, and it'll be up to us to add. So if I wanted to bond Lego Builders, the bond rate is 2%, so their base proposal was $28,000. I'd have to add 2% of $28,000 to their price at the bottom of this form to get it to a bottom number. Okay. Also, in this bid tab form, we've got places where we're going to list the different scopes. So in the masonry world, we're talking about some CMU, we're talking about some split-face block, we're talking about reinforcing steel that goes in with that. These are our estimated quantities that our estimating department has come up with. We've done some takeoff at a high level, so we understand how much this has got. We've pulled historical data, and we've established in this column here, it says budget TTL, it's budget total. So that is these are our plug numbers right here in this column. And so for instance, we came up with a plug number for the masonry, or excuse me, for the reinforcing steel. And none of our masonry subs in this example had reinforcing steel, so we're going to move that number, we're going to move that plug number, placeholder number, over into each of these columns. If one of these subs would have had it in their price, or if they would have had it included above, we would have marked down a Y for yes, or INCL for included. Okay, so this is basically just a form that helps us analyze in a visual manner what's included and what isn't included in the bid. Okay, so we're putting together a bid tab sheet. We're going to list out the applicable specification sections. Now, I apologize on our example. It doesn't show that, but let's say we have a spec section for CMU. Let's say we had one for limestone veneer. Let's say we had one for face brick, or whatever the project entailed. We would list those specification sections on the bid tab sheet because that's part of reviewing the proposal. We want to make sure the subs are acknowledging those specific specification sections in their proposal. We, again, want all of our subs to acknowledge in one manner or another, is their proposal per plan and spec. And what we mean by that is the pricing that they're giving us and the work that they're going to perform in compliance with the bid documents. Okay, and so if they can't answer yes to this question, we want to know why. We want to know why or where or how they're deviating from the spec, and then we need to determine at that point if the proposal is going to even be usable to us. Okay, maybe we can have them go back and fix something and it'll be usable, maybe we can't. Okay, the specifications generally break down the work by trade. And you guys have probably seen this before. Most architectural firms use some flavor of this in organizing the work. It's called the master format, developed by the folks at the Construction Specifications Institute. It used to be divisions 1 through 16. Anybody remember those days? Back when it was 1 through 16. Okay, now it's divisions 1 through 50. And this sheet kind of shows some of the changes that have happened there. Mechanical, electrical, used to be divisions 15 and 16, and now they've moved out to divisions 21 through 28. Okay, so the CSI expanded this back in 2004 from the original 16-division breakdown into the divisional breakdown that we see in today's architectural specifications. Okay, so again, we're looking at this sheet here. We've listed the different types of scope on this project. So these are the different types of masonry. We have our budget of quantities, we have our placeholder numbers, and we're starting to input the different bidders' information on there and record what they do and don't have. So we're filling out the scope of work, which is what's kind of on the left-hand side of the deal. So we're listing the different items of inclusion down the left-hand side of the page on the bid tab sheet. We want to include as much detail as necessary to allow us to compare proposals. And so the amount of detail that you put on a bid tab sheet is really a factor of how much you know about the job and how much time you have to put this thing together. If you started this morning, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of detail on it. If you started a week ago, or if your company has canned versions or kind of master templates of these different bid tab worksheets, then you probably already had a pretty good starting point, and you're just editing it, tailoring it to the specifics of the project that you're working on. Okay, knowing what's necessary and creating a bid tab form takes experience. The more of these that you've done, the more projects you've worked on, the deeper your experience as an estimator, the better you're going to be at doing it. Kind of balancing the level of detail versus the available time. And then the goal is to try, if you can, keep it to a one-page analysis, and that's simply because it's harder to flip back and forth among multiple pieces of paper. The form we flashed up on screen showed 6 columns. If we had 8 masonry subcontractors, we might have to start another sheet or something like that and to keep track of the information. Okay, so there's an old expression out there, we've all heard it, knowledge is power, right? So the more we know about a project, the more we know about the individual scopes, the more helpful it's going to be. I mentioned sometimes you're bringing in people into the war room to help put these jobs together. They may not have seen this project until today. They don't have the depth of knowledge that you've accumulated in the time you've been working on. We've got to find a way to quickly educate those folks, and we can do that with these bid-tab worksheets. So if we've done a good job of listing out what all the scope items are for that, we can quickly hand that to somebody who hasn't seen it before, sit down, give them a quick 5-10 minute meeting, and get them up to speed on it. Okay, and that way they're equipped with the information that they need. We're going to fill out the budget column. We're going to put our placeholder numbers, our plug numbers in there so that we have them available to us, so that if a proposal is missing something, we've got a number, we can move it over and fill that hole in their proposal. Okay, so we're going to do that by listing and quantifying the items of work, kind of like we saw on the example we looked at. And then as we're going down through our checklist of scope items, the one I keep flashing on the screen is fairly simplified. But imagine you could have 20, 25, 30 different items that you're clocking through, and so you're answering either yes, no, or included or excluded. So you're basically trying to catalog in what they've got and what they don't have, or the question marks in for the stuff that's unclear, and maybe those question marks are what you're going to call that sub about when you're trying to clarify scope. So imagine getting the scope sheets from your subcontractors the day before or a couple of days before would give you a whole lot more time to beat your way through these bid tab worksheets so that on bid day you're down to just sticking in the numbers, in case that would be helpful. All right. So we're going to use that plug number to fill in any missing scope, and so we definitely want to know what stuff is worth, because that's going to be helpful to us. Okay, so again, you can see how the subs were all missing. The reinforcing steel, we moved our plug number around. If we would have had one of these 3 subs who was missing the split face block, we could have moved our 24,732 over there and filled the hole. As it turns out, all 3 of our subcontractors, we were able to mark yes when we were reviewing the proposals, that they did in fact have both the CMU, gray CMU, and the split face, and then we just had to move over our plug number or placeholder number for the reinforcing steel. Okay, so when we're doing it, we're reviewing the bids. It says list first proposer. That just means the first sub. So you can list them in order as you're reviewing them. That's fine. You don't have to put the low sub in the first column and the second low sub in the second column. If you're good enough to do that the first go around, that's awesome. But most people are just kind of putting them in, processing through the quotes as they come in. You don't know when that low bid's going to come in. It might be the first one you got that day. It might be the last one you get that day. It might be in the middle somewhere. Okay, so we'll probably just add them to the bid tab sheet as they come into us in those waves over the course of the day. Okay, and then there's some general housekeeping stuff we want to be looking at on these subcontractor and supplier proposals, namely, have they seen all the addenda? Okay, so all subs, all addenda all the time. It's kind of a philosophy I like to have. Are they per plan and spec? And if not, what have they deviated on, and can we use their bid? Okay, it's a taxable project. Have they included sales tax? If you're doing bid work and gross receipts state, okay, and if they got that in there, the sales tax state, they got that in there. Do we have a bond rate? Okay, even if we decide not to bond our subcontractors because we want our overall prime bid to be as low as possible, the fact that a sub can offer a bond rate tells us quite a bit about this. It tells us that they've been through the underwriting process and that they're maybe a little more financially healthy than some of the other bidders who may not be able to provide a bond rate. So it's good to know that. Sometimes we might even know people's license numbers or whatever if that's required for the proposal. So those are like general housekeeping kind of stuff that we want to look at. The other questions you might want to ask all your subs if you're going through this, do they have all their mobilization costs? Do they have hoisting? Do they have their own trailer, laydown area, stuff like that? So again, you can add to this list. This isn't an all-inclusive list. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and write in their base proposal. Okay, so on the example that we looked at, the first sub, which was Lego Masonry, they gave a separate price, I think, for the split face instead of the gray CMU. So you may have subs that give you one number, you may have subs that give you several numbers for the different parts and pieces, and you have to have those numbers up. So whatever comes at you, you've kind of got to be prepared to roll with the punches. And again, if you're clocking down your list, cataloging the scope inclusions and exclusions, you can put INCL for included. You can put a check mark for good to go. You can put a Y for yes and an N for no, whatever. So the markings that you choose to use can be tailor to whatever makes sense to you, whatever you're most efficient at doing it. Okay, so we're eventually going to try to reach a subtotal on this, which is going to be the base proposal that we get from the sub, plus any plug numbers that we have to move over to fill those missing pieces of the pricing in to try to get down to that. Okay? All right, then if we do want to bond our subs, we're going to take that subtotal, we're going to multiply it by the rate, the bond rate that the sub supplied. If we're dealing with supplier proposals, we typically don't add performance and payment bond rates onto those. So if it's a supply-only proposal, you're not going to add bond to that. You might need to add sales tax into some of your subcontract proposals. Supply-only proposals won't have sales tax in it, so you may need to add that if your spreadsheet's set up in a way where you're not going to add tax down at the bottom. And just as kind of an emergency rule of thumb, if you get a proposal, subcontractor proposal that's missing sales tax, you can take a kind of a wild educated guess and assume that about 50% of the bid would be material, and you can use the local tax rate and multiply it by that number and come up with something that you can plug in so you're not missing the number. So, like I said, that's kind of an emergency rule of thumb. The better approach would be to pick up the telephone, call the subcontractor back, say, hey, we noticed you're missing sales tax, and you guys quickly go back, figure that, call us back, and we'll provide the proposal. Okay, so we're going to do all that kind of stuff, and it's going to distill down to helping us achieve what we call a comparable total. So we're going to calculate the apples to apples totals at the bottom of this by adding up all the stuff that we've populated above in the column for that subcontractor, and then at the bottom of our bid tab sheet, we're going to ultimately pick the best, most responsible, least risk sub number that we can, and that's what gets moved to the summary sheet where we bring it all together. So this next slide, I guess we lost our better names here. It's Lego, blockheads, and liquid stick. Okay, so you can see from this number that bidder A ended up having the lowest proposal price there of $47,785, and notice that number's higher than our placeholder number. Okay, so anytime you get a real industry bid, a real market bid, it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and replace your plug numbers. Okay, remember your plug number was just an educated guess. At the end of the day, it's an educated guess. Now there may be certain scenarios where you're so familiar with the scope and you have such good cost data that you know you can get it done for that. So you might choose in the end to roll your own number, use your plug number with the hope that you're going to buy out the job later and get it. But normally, if you get a market bid and you want to plug that and get that placeholder number out of there if you can. You can also see on this where down at the bottom we've done things like add bond to each bidder, and we've also accounted for sales tax. Bidder C had it in there. Bidder B said yes, they had it in there. They gave us a verbal on that. And bidder A didn't have it, but we were able to calculate it. So now we've reached those apples to apples totals that we want to get to at the bottom of the bid tab sheet. So imagine this is just one of several bid tab sheets. Maybe this one's for the masonry. You're going to do the same process for roofing, or mechanical work, or electrical work, or drywall work. Okay, all the different work packages. You're going to go through a similar process and get down to these apples to apples bids, so you can decide which one to move to the summary sheet. Let's see. So we're going to tell you guys that as you're working through this, try to stick to the process to avoid making mistakes. You're going to have stuff missing on these proposals. You're going to have to come up and talk to these bidders. Okay, so that's really our session equivalent of picking up the phone and calling them back. Okay, you're going to walk up to the front of the room and talk to them and ask them questions. And so what we're seeing up here on screen is a little snippet of the summary sheet. Okay, so on the summary sheet we've got the various classifications of work listed out here. Our Division 1 job site level general conditions, the building concrete package, we've got some precast, masonry, steel, casework, and we're now starting to move those numbers over. So in this column, we're actually writing in who the bidder was. Okay, so it says bidder A, so that would be like Lego block, or Lego masonry contractor, and then it's at 47,000. So we're starting to move those columns. And this total column on the summary sheet, you're going to see this on your computers. This is where we start adding it all up. Okay, Phil, does the summary sheet have an automatic summation form at the bottom of that building? Okay, so the spreadsheet's already going to be set up to start adding these numbers up for you. It will already have the numbers that are in there added into that total, and your job is going to be to start filling out the rest of it so that you've accounted for all of this in your total when we get to that point. Okay, so which price do we use? Okay, we talked about getting the apples to apples total. Okay, so that's kind of the baseline of which number to move over to the summary sheet. But we also want to recognize that risk analysis is part of the estimating process. If you're a Kansas City contractor and you only work in Kansas City, you're going to very quickly know and learn who the good subs and suppliers are. You're going to have a comfort level with those folks. If you're a company that works all over the U.S. and you're jumping into different markets and you're learning a whole new crop of subcontractors and suppliers every time you bid a new job, that's a lot of risk to take on, because you don't know who the good subs are. Okay, you're the stranger coming into town trying to get it figured out on the fly. Okay, so risk analysis is kind of part of it. That low price that we got to, may still not be the best price. Maybe we got to apples comparison, but the number that's low, we just feel like it's too low. Maybe we need to add a contingency to that if we feel like it's a little bit too low on the low side. Okay, there's some risk there. Basically, it comes down to applying your experience and judgment and trying to get this stuff worked out on the front end so that when you get to the buyout stage, there's no hidden landmines that are going to trip up your project execution. You got to work all this out during the estimating phase. Okay. Some other things, just kind of general things to keep in mind here. If the spread between the low bid and the second bidder is greater than 10%, that could be a red flag. Bear in mind that a lot of trade contractors or vendors kind of bid work in the profit range of 10 to 15%. Must be in blank. Sorry about that. Okay, apologize for that. Okay, so if we see something that's greater than that 10%, it could be an indicator of a couple things. It could be some scope that was missed that we also missed in our review process and talking with them. It could be, not that this happens that often, but it could be that the proposal was deliberately low with the expectation that they're going to try to make it up on change orders. Okay, there's folks out there that kind of adopt that as a business practice. If you have a lot of plug numbers in your estimate that you were not able to get out of it, that also equates to a lot of risk. So again, if we get a market bid, even if our placeholder number is low, we still want to get it out of there if we can. Okay, unless we're just absolutely certain we can buy it out for that later and get it done. We want to use those market bids and reduce the risk there by getting real bids in place of those placeholders. And then the bond rate, again, if we decide to bond the subs, that's great. If we decide not to bond the subs, just looking at their rates tells us a little bit about them. The higher their bond rate, the riskier they are. The lower their bond rate, the better they looked to the surety when they went through the pre-qualification or underwriting process. Okay, so that's all good information to have. So now we're back on the summary sheet here. We're at the very bottom. Okay, so we've come down through all the direct costs. We've migrated all the good pricing from our bid tab sheets onto the summary sheet. And we've totaled it all up. We've got a direct cost total of $2.2 million. Okay, we've got places on the sheet where we could add for sales tax and we could add for sub-bond, except you guys will have already done that on your bid tab sheet, so we're going to leave those zeroed. Okay, and we're going to plug in our insurance premiums. So maybe we talk to our insurance company and they give us a quote for building risk or whatever we've got going on. We've got some specialized insurance we need to procure for this job. We're going to get the premiums plugged in. And then we've got our own bond rate. So the owner's asking for surety bonds, performance and payment bonds from us. Our rate, this price tier is 1.35%. So we're going to add on another $29,000 for that. That gets us to a subtotal of $2,275,000. And then finally is the fun part. We put on the contractor's fee, the markup, the OH&P, the overhead and profit. Okay, so that 5% encompasses both of those. So maybe let's say we've got 1% overhead and 4% profit. Right? That'd be good. Probably more like 3 and 2 or 3.5 and 1.5 or something like that. And so 113,000, we're going to add that in, and we reach a calculated total of $2,389,485. Now we can quote that on the bid form if we want to. It takes a long time to write that out. Okay, so we might want to round it to a more whole number. In this example, it looks like they shaved about $9,500 off of it to get the job, or that's the price they're going to pitch to the owner. Okay, I don't know if I want to give up $9,500 of profit on this job. I might shave a little bit off of it. Okay? But we're going to leave that up to you guys. You're going to reach a calculated total, and then you're going to have to decide what you actually want to quote on the bid form. Okay, so we've got just a couple more slides to go through here real fast. So this is an example proposal from a company called Steel Inc. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look for is what's the price. So they quoted us a price, $311 a ton. Okay, so that's a unit cost, and if we don't have a quantity for reinforcing steel, that's going to be difficult for us to use that price. Okay, they're going to give us some scope items here, what they've included. So basically, if you read this proposal, it's a labor-only bid. They're quoting installation of rebar with no material. So it's a what we call a labor and equipment bid, where they're not furnishing anything other than tie wire and maybe the concrete bricks that go underneath it. So we've got to have our own quantities to make use of this bid. Okay, we're also looking for exclusions. Okay, what are they missing? So if you read the fine print here, it's probably hard for you guys to see. They've excluded unloading of the reinforcing stuff. They're going to tie it, they're going to put it in the excavations or inside the formwork, but they're not going to unload. They're going to say that that's the responsibility of the GC. So we note that as an exclusion, and if we're going to already have equipment out on site to unload it, great. If not, we're going to have to plug in a number to get that material unloaded. They've excluded bond, but they've given us a bond rate, so they're bondable. That's good for us to know. And if we decide to add bond to the price, we're able to do so. And then finally, we're looking for any qualifications or limitations of the proposal. They've telling us that the price is good for 60 days, and they've also got some payment terms in there with regard to how they expect to get paid on this project. Okay, so those are just some fast examples. I'm going faster because we're cutting into our time here, but we're ready to kind of get started. Just remember, rules of the game. The vendor proposals are going to come to you in waves. Question and answers are available. Come up and ask the subs. If you have questions, keep an eye on the clock. Make sure you get your bid turned in on time. And I'm going to say, let's get ready, let's get set, go. Good luck to everybody. All right, please note we have on the screen the official bid clock. So we're now counting down the final 30 minutes.
What do you say? Oh, it is.
Coming up on the 1 minute mark, it's time to write in a number and get them in the envelopes.
I hate the ones you really work on all the time and really shave your numbers if you want it really bad, and somebody beats you out like crazy. Let them have it. You can have it at that point. I wanted it really bad. You want it worse than me.
Congratulations, all 7 teams got
How he laid it out, I mean, it's exactly
on the deadline, so good job. We're going to open, so I think in the packet of stuff that we gave you guys today, there should be a form to write down the bids. Is that right, Phil? Okay, so we're going to get organized up here. Give us just a minute, and then we're going to do a kind of simulated rip and read here. Where we're going to open up. Pass out the.
What?
Been there. Party my ass off there. Great St. Patty's Day parade.
Read the first bid here. So we've opened the first envelope. It looks like the proposal is from a company called Academy Estimators. This is for the McBride building. And it looks like they have acknowledged Addendum number 1. It looks like they have included a bid for alternate number 1, a deduct of $7,000. Looks like their base bid is $2,160,000 even. 2,160,000.
That was my bad for rushing off real fast on that. If it was.
First bid was Academy Estimators.
That's right.
There's nothing to lose here. It's all make believe.
So now, Academy Estimators did include their summary sheets, so just FYI, normally we don't send these to the owner if we can avoid it. Okay. Second bid today has been received from a company called Dragon Corporation. Am I saying that right? It could be Dragon. It's like Dragon Corporation. Located at 123 Awesome Lane. Okay, so they have acknowledged addendum number 1. They have provided a quote for alternate number 1 as a deduct of $7,000. And their base bid, $2,246,000 even. 2,246,000. Authorized signatory is Johnny Karate. What's that? Okay, third bid received today is from a company called 7x5 General Contractors. I'm not sure what that means. 7x5 General Contractors. Okay, it's for the McBride Brothers building. They have acknowledged addendum number 1. They've included a bid for alternate number 1, a deduct of $7,540.40. $7,540.40 deduct. Base bid for 7x5 General Contractors is $2,200,000 even. 2,200,000. Next bid today is from the A team, which I've missed greatly since it went off the air. They have acknowledged addendum number 1. They have included a price for alternate number 1 as a deduct of $7,000, and they provided a base bid of $2,256,000 even. 2,256,000. Next bid is from a company called ASPE GC. ASPE GC. They have acknowledged addendum number 1. They have included a price for alternate number 1 as a deduct of $7,000. And their base bid, $2,215,000 even. 2,215,000.
I think it says it, yeah.
Okay, next bid is from a company called OK Construction. They have acknowledged addendum number 1. They provided a price for alternate number 1 as a deduct of $7,000. And their base bid, $2,193,000 even. 2,193,000. They've also provided their summary sheet. And the final bid that we've received for the McBride Brothers building today is from a company called Soulard Construction.
Yeah,
Soulard Company, excuse me. For the McBride Brothers building. They have acknowledged addendum number 1. They've provided a price for alternate number 1 as $7,000. Their base bid, $2,160,000 even. 2,160,000.
That other company with the deduct is low.
I thought we put
Alternate 1 appears to be an ad.
We didn't put negative.
$2,223,373. So today it's probably not necessarily about being low, it's about being closest to the pin. Did you make all the right choices to get you as close to that number as possible? And I gotta tell you, sitting kind of behind the scenes here, listening to you guys go, you guys did a fantastic job of asking scope clarification questions. So you guys can give yourselves a hand. I heard a lot of really good work in the future. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay warm out there. And we'll hopefully see you again next year.